They have more degrees than a thermometer.
When you're engaged,
stands for their interest.
There's a lot of
Your
planning.
daughters will be here and you
I
will
believe
be
in mental health.
make sure that we have mental
We travel together on the path to intentional leadership, one conversation at a time. We go down a new road of insight with an expert guest who knows what it takes to navigate the opportunities and challenges of leadership. Why? Because they've already been there. So grab your compass and whatever else you need, and let's set out, leading the way.
Hello and welcome to Leading the Way, where we grow through conversations with leaders who have walked the path before us. I'm Nagmal Samari, and if you have not already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you do not miss any future episodes. And this is your opportunity to interact live with our guest experts. So if you have a question, drop it in the chat or tell us what resonated with you from today's episode. Today, I'm joined by Emily Bauman. Hi, Emily.
Hello.
Emily is a leadership coach, entrepreneur, and elected official with over 20 years of experience across business, ownership, corporate leadership, and public service. She is the founder of 12 Trees Coaching, where she helps individuals and organizations lead with clarity, navigate challenges, and take meaningful action in both life and work. And we all know this is much needed. Before stepping into coaching, Emily spent more than 2 decades in corporate roles spanning industries like telecommunications, healthcare, hospitality. Wow. She's also served her community through multiple public campaigns and now holds a seat on the Westland City Council. Emily brings a grounded, people-first approach to leadership and loves helping others through purpose, strategy, and self-awareness. Welcome, Emily. And is there anything that you haven't done yet?
Thank you. Oh, well, there's always something to do.
Well, for sure. Now we know that Emily loves to keep busy.
I do.
But nothing without intention, right?
Mm-hmm. I've had this, I saw sometimes say, nothing's random. It may feel obscure, but it's not random.
I love that. Let's dive in with your I know you're going to talk to us about your Toolbelt, but before I get to that, I'm really curious to learn about 12 Trees Coaching. How did that start, and where did this name come from? It's so unique.
Thanks. So 12 Trees Coaching was it was born in 2019, but it's one of those things where when I had my business, my husband and I had our landscape business, I knew there was something missing. I knew there was just something missing. I couldn't figure out what it was. I ended up getting connected with a business coach after we moved to Michigan, and I started working on business coaching. Even then, I realized that because a lot of business coaches, and I'm catching myself, a lot of business coaches actually work with plans and materials, and they work with the teams, and they work with a business owner. But for me, there was always something missing. There was another layer that I thought was not happening during that process of the coaching for the plans. It could get there, but it would take time. And for me, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was certain things in my life that I was just like, we don't have time for this. We don't have time to take time to do the things we need to do. And through that, I started realizing that I wanted to work with people, not plans. I still do strategic planning because it's still a very important need that a lot of organizations don't do well. They might have a plan they put on a shelf, but to actually execute on it is where they're missing. But I realized I wanted to work with people and get a little bit down into what might be preventing us from achieving the things we wanted to do, hitting the goals that we put in our planners back when we were in our early 20s. And years later, we're like, why haven't we gotten that goal yet? We've got other things. Other things have happened, other successes, other life things, but really that part. And so that's really where the impetus from 12 Trees came. As far as the name comes from, trees connects with the landscaping company. And one of the things that my husband taught me was that and not just trees, but other things, but in this case it was trees, when you want to plant a tree and you have a newer tree and you want to stand straight, you need to make sure that you have a foundation that's deep enough and strong enough to hold that tree to withstand the wind. And when the wind comes, if you've got the foundation solid, then when the wind comes, the roots will take hold. They'll get stronger and stronger and stronger. And so that's where the trees came, because it's about foundations. It's about really getting that strength through this root system, through all the different aspects of your life. You're becoming stronger. And whether it be adversity or other things, you're becoming a stronger person when you can have the right tools and the right disciplines to actually weather that wind. Whereas if you're this is where he would tell me, he's like, a lot of times, and this is a lot of people will put straps around the tree. I don't know if you see it. They'll put a new tree in and they'll put all these straps around it. That actually weakens this tree. So from my perspective, when it comes to people, I was like, okay, so if we put too many crutches on ourselves or dependencies, or we lean on somebody or something too much, we could become weaker too. Having the right foundation and move and swaying in the wind. So that's where trees came from.
Wow.
Like,
there's a lot to unpack, but I'm so happy you're talking about this. Keep going.
That's where I say it might feel obscure, but it's not random.
It's not, no.
So the 12 comes from the fact that biblically, mathematically, and in many ways, 12 is a perfect number. 12 disciples, 12 tribes, 12 months. There's a lot to 12. Okay. Even mathematically, it's divisible by 1, 2, 3, 6, and 12. So there's a perfection to it. And then if you go a little deeper, and I stay away from some of this a little bit, but there's some power behind 12. There's strength and power behind the number 12. So through all that, brought the two together, and there's 12 trees.
Wow. Wow. Oh, wow. There is so much in that, just that name of your company. I love it. I want to jump right into the 12 disciplines. Okay. I'm really excited to learn about what these are. And, I do have questions for you on the what you just talked about right now, but I want to wait to see if you actually are going to touch on them. So go right ahead.
So the 12 disciplines came from through different, whether it be books I was reading, studies I was having, personal, my own development, my own leadership coaching that I've had. And it came down to, I came up with 12 core disciplines that would help a person become a better leader. I will tell people, I don't believe that leaders are born. I believe that they are nurtured. I do believe, like any talent, someone can have a predisposition to leadership and have some tools that they might be innately born with, but I don't believe that ends there. I believe that, and one of the books I read, I will tell you, is called Spark. And right now I'm not remembering the authors, but they are Michigan authors. All three of them, I believe, were in the Marines. And they actually are siblings and a friend, I think it is, or something like that. And the three authors, and like I said, it's a Michigan company, and it's called Spark. And the idea being is that everyone has a spark of leadership, and it's how you feed that flame, and hopefully not suppress that flame, but that you can actually, just like when you light a stove, you have a spark, and you light a stove, and you can make a flame get bigger, or you can dial it down. And the idea that if you are nurturing and you've got the right tools, you can actually become great leaders, regardless of your position, regardless of your title, and even in spite of them. Someone could go through life never having a title and be the best leader, whether they're leading their family or they're leading their friends or just whatever it is. And in their role, they're leading themselves first. It's a whole other story. I don't know if we'll get that deep. So the 12 disciplines come from these core disciplines about the person. They're not necessarily, while there are some actions and some tasks that people can do, I find a lot of leadership training touches on what you can do to be a better leader. But I want to talk about 12 disciplines is about who you are in being that leader that actually allows you to do those things. And I find that a lot of leadership trainings and programs fall short of that little bit of deeper look to the person. So these are all disciplines that we work on an individual. There are actually 4 modules, so to speak, where we work on the temple, which is the person. We work on transformation, which is the person. Then we work on what I call trajectory, which is where you're starting to work with others. And then the transfer, where you're actually taking someone else's hand, walking alongside them, giving them the tools, and then leading them so that they're now the next leader. And that's the disciplines.
Wow, hang on. So temple, transformation,
Trajectory
and transfer are part of the 12, or
so there's the 12 are broken into those four.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Four
All right.
categories.
I see. Well, I'm really curious. When you say temple, that's
The person. That's
okay.
kind of.
Can you get into that?
That comes from, so one of the things, and this is blending a little bit with my thoughts on government, is when we're responsible for what's going on, we are responsible to ourselves first. The first form of government is self-government.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say, if you can't get self-government right, don't step into other forms. Don't step, be careful, because once you step into other people's spaces, they're trying to govern themselves or govern other things. So I always say you have to work on this first. So temple is all about this person and how important, and I use the word temple because it is, when we think of temples, we think of glory and majesty, and we sometimes think of like this amazing, solid building structure. And I'm like, that's us. We can be amazing, strong, solid structures, and we need to be. So, for example, one of the abundance mentality is one of the disciplines inside temple. And I did not bring my list of all where they go as far as all those. I could always share that at another point. I actually did not. I was so focused on the tool belt that I didn't actually bring all the different elements of the disciplines.
I don't want to. What you're saying is so interesting that it got my it got me sparked up to learn more. But I don't want it. Yeah, I don't want you to veer away from the tool belt. But it just, I love the analogy of being a temple, of being strong and grounded and self-aware and working on yourself first before you go on and do anything else. And self-leadership is something that it has really not been looked at, I feel. And I'm so happy that you talked about leadership and when you started and you said that it's not just a position or rank, because a lot of people hear podcasts or read books and see leadership and think, oh, that's not me. It doesn't apply to me. But if you're a human being, you're a leader. You have the potential to become one. Not just in a job, not just in a social setting, but in everywhere in life. So I love that you talked about this. But this is why I wanted to kind of learn more. And let's see if we have time to go back to this.
Okay, we maybe will go back and I can bring.
Let's get into the tool belt. Let's do that.
I can pop some things up if we need to. So because we talked about what we were going to talk about, and we wanted to focus a little bit. So I did pull out the responsive tool belt. The responsive tool belt is actually one of the most commonly requested disciplines I have, because when I start talking about it, people are like, oh, I need that. And one of the things I will tell you, I'm going to grab this for a second. One of the things with the responsive tool belt is, have you ever heard the poem called Attitude by Chuck Swindoll?
I think so.
Okay. I'm going to read it just because it actually speaks to a lot of the pieces in this, and especially with once we start getting more into the responsive tool belt. So, Attitude by Charles Swindoll. The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It is more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what other people think, say, or do. It is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, a home. The remarkable thing is we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we embrace for that day. We cannot change our past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play the one string we have, and that is our attitude. I am convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes. When I've loved that. My dad actually shared that with me way when I was much younger. And as I was doing the Toolbelt, the disciplines, I realized this is one of those areas where I think people hear it. It sounds wonderful, but then they're like, well, but how do I react if I'm triggered? How do I react if I'm nervous or scared, doing a podcast, having an interview? We come into these situations in life where maybe something happened to us younger, and now 20 years later something happens and it triggers our memory of that, and we're frozen. So all those things that happen over life, there's an element of like, well, wait a minute, how do I say that? Or someone will say, well, I'm going to tell them the way it is. I'm like, you could do that, and you're probably right. But what if you said it differently? What if instead, so in addition to how I react to it, I took it a step further and how I respond to it? And that's really where the responsible tool belt came into play, because again, I'd be asked the question, well, how do I respond? I'm like, oh yeah, that element of being able to know what to do, what to say, how to say it, when to say it was missing, especially when people are in that trigger moment where they're nervous, they're angry, they're whatever emotion. And so I say, it doesn't matter what the emotion you're having. Obviously, emotional intelligence does play into this. But sometimes if we actually do the tools, we can actually gain the emotional intelligence, since that's something that we can keep working on the rest of our entire lives. It's not something we're born with. So the responsive tool belt it's really about, and I would say this is not scientific, but I separate the brain into kind of two categories. You've got your lizard brain, which is the one that is the smaller portion of the brain, and the one that responds or reacts to things. Something happens to us, we react. And it's an important piece, because the lizard brain, we always say, if you're confronted with a bear, you better hope that your lizard brain is on fire and ready to protect you, because you've got to be ready to handle ththings and know what to do. And so you need that element of that fight, flight, or freeze. I know there's a lot of science, I'm blanking on my scientific words, but anyway, you've got that real
survival mechanism.
Right. And you've got that, and that's important to have. But most of the time we're not confronted with a bear. Our spouses are really not a grizzly bear. Our children are not a drooling leopard. They're not. They might be drooling, but they're not leopards. They're not out to kill us. So that said, obviously, I'm like, if that happens, you want that. So there is science behind being able to quiet that lizard brain and move into what I call your hippo brain, which would be your slower brain, the cognitive brain, the thinking brain. I chose hippo. I will give you, again, obscure, but not random, but not obscure. Hippo is considered to be the most dangerous animal on the planet. People don't realize that. They just think of them as big and slow, but they can move fast, and they are one of the most, there's a lot to it, that they actually are one of the most dangerous animals on the planet. So I tell people, I'm like, you use your brain well, and in a good way, you can be dangerous. You can handle every situation that comes your way. Every interview, every question, you become the person that actually is able to handle things and not get riled up, not get shaken, not get stirred, not be the one that you just see just kind of go off the rails. You can be that person when you work on the tools and train your brain. And again, that's where responsive tool belt really is a great place to start, and then keep it going. Because what happens is, and it's called tool belt because you have responses that should someone come at you with something that's just triggering. And we know that in today's world, there are so many things that can trigger people. Someone can say something and they just want to, they kind of want to go on the attack. And I'm like, no, pull back. Don't do that. Think about saying it differently. So, and again, it's every situation. Like, I would tell people, like, when they have their first interview, or even somebody who has been working for a company for 20, 30 years, and now they have to go back to interviewing again. Those are situations where if you're not working on how you're going to respond to the questions and practicing, you might not be ready, and you want to show up on your best. So the situations are anything. And again, I do like to use in the husband and wife, because that does seem to be one of the more common situations with that. So the responsive tool belt is all about having grace under pressure, and then the right things to say or do. And very first, I always tell people, in everything I always teach, the first thing you want to do is breathe. Get oxygen to your brain. Take a moment and it's breathing in through your nose, and then I usually practice breathe in and then count to 8 through your mouth. That can change. That can be all you need. I always tell people, you might not need a ton of responses.
Yeah.
You need some. So that's the first thing I would say do. The second one that actually can be used, and I tell people in every single situation, and I encourage people to practice it so it doesn't sound snarky, is thank you. If
Oh, I love
somebody
that.
says something you don't like, or you're feeling that heat inside you, breathe and say thank you. You could say thank you for sharing. You could just say thank you, and that be it. Thank you, period. Sometimes nothing else is needed. And I'll give you an example. And even before I developed these, I had a mom situation many, many years ago, where my daughter was at this other girl's friend's house, and some of the little girls' things got broken. They'd been playing. This is they would see each other. I think it was like a weekly thing. They were like always there, and something got broken. So I picked up my daughter. I got an email from the mom, and she just lit into me about my daughter. She never told me that there was any issues with my daughter, anything like that. Everything was great. I'd pick her up. She'd be like, "Oh, it was great today, great today." So all the positive, right? All of a sudden, I get this email out of the blue, lighting into me about how my daughter is just disrespectful and all these kind of things. And I'm the first person to say, "What? Not my daughter." I'm the first person to say, "Blake, what did you do?" I'm the first person to think my daughter could be that person. My child could be these people, because when I'm not with them, I don't know how they act. So unlike, I definitely I did not say not my daughter. I said, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" So really, really scathing. And some things got broken. Some of her nice things got broken, I guess, at this one of the playthings. So I asked my daughter what happened, and she told me her story, which was a little different. Her story, of course, was that the daughter broke it and was afraid and didn't want to say anything.
Wow.
And now again, he said, she said, right? There was a little bit of that. I'm like, I don't even know I don't know the whole story. I was like, okay, without talking to the mom, I don't really know the whole story. I don't know all the things. And I think I may have, I don't know that I actually called her on it. I thought about calling her on it, but she responded. She sent me an email. And I have a general rule that you respond in kind. If someone calls you, call them back. If they email you, email them back. If you need to move off, then go ahead, move off and do something different. But always to at least start with in kind. So I prepared my response to her, or I'll say reply. And it was a lengthy one, because I was pretty irritated that this is the first time I'd heard about things. She was pulling things that happened. She was pulling up things that happened 2 weeks ago and all this kind of stuff. There was this huge email of all this history. And I was like, okay, this is really unfair. Even if my daughter did do something, why am I just finding about it now? She's under your care. There's all the mom things. So I did create an email, and it was pretty cutting. I'm pretty good with words and pretty good in my writing. and it was pretty cutting. And I thought, let me sleep on it.
Mm.
And I did. And the next day, I literally erased it and simply wrote, thank you. And this was way before all of this. It was all before this. Was because my daughter would have been like 6 and she's 25 now. So,
Wow.
So we're talking a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I responded in an email in kind and just said, thank you. And I didn't ask her to defend it. I didn't ask her to prove it. I didn't say anything. I didn't defend my daughter. I just let it go. I told my daughter, we talked about what happened. We talked about what she did do wrong, what she didn't do wrong. We had a nice conversation. So I would be a good mom with my daughter. But I said, we're going to take a break now from, going over there and things like that. And it's okay. You'll see her at school and all this kind of stuff. What was really interesting was the next time I ran into her at school at an event, she was like, oh, hi. No hard feelings, no grudges, nothing. And I thought, I preserved her. I'm preserved. There's nothing. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's a powerful thing. So I'm like, thank you. And that's how I learned personally how to use that.
Wow. That is so powerful. You know what's funny? I was listening to an audiobook actually today, re-listening again, David Schwartz, Magic of Thinking Big. I love this book. One of the things he talks about was, and I don't remember the whole thing, but before you respond to anything, before you spend energy on anything, think, is it worth it? And I think that's what you did. And it is so powerful. In no tension. The girls didn't have to go through this, issues between them in the school. And a lot of times I think we react so quickly without thinking, out of emotion, not really thoughts. We don't think, we don't get to the thinking part. We just react our emotion. But this is amazing. Just thank you. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes that's all that needs to be said.
Yeah.
If more is needed, I would say you can do thank you and thank you for sharing. Sometimes I'll even say thank you. And I've said this, I've actually used this. Thank you for feeling safe enough to tell me that.
Wow.
What happens to the other person? This is the amazing part about it. As my story, my testimony shared. What happens to the other person is because they're preserved. They're not prepared for you to say thank you. They're not prepared for that to be welcomed. So not only do you move yourself out of your reactive brain, your lizard brain, you actually start moving them out of theirs. And then we can actually have a different conversation if it's needed. If it's not needed, it's not needed. Sometimes it's not needed, but sometimes it is. And we have to, go to the next thing. So I always say, I tell people that if that's all you use, that might be enough.
Yeah.
But there's other ones too. So one of the other ones, if someone asks you a question. So in this case, say you're having an interview and someone asks you a question, and the question is meant to trigger you. And again, I've had a lot of these situations, so I can actually use them. And I'll say, thank you for asking that question. And again, that's enough. That's also enough breather for me to move and maybe think. Maybe I don't even know the answer. I tell people, if you're interviewing and you don't know how to answer it, breathing, pausing, and saying thank you for asking that question can be enough to move you into your own brain, because maybe it's not triggering. It's just, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And you can move into a thought, and then you can actually start talking and hopefully sounding coherent.
It gives you enough time to think about what to say next. I love that.
Yep. Sometimes, and again, it's all about pausing and, like I said, moving into your thinking brain, that you can actually have a non-emotional conversation, so that you're not defensive. It actually changes your sweat. You actually don't perspire the same way. All those things change. All those physiological things change when you are breathing, pausing, and doing the things that allow you to move into your hippo brain or your cognitive brain. So then you just connect. Then it's just bridging. Then it's just connecting with what they said, with what you might do next. So thank you for asking that question. Or that's something I have put a lot of time considering in, or a lot of time in considering. Or we share equal concerns in that area. And maybe we don't share everything, but we might have some equal concerns in a particular topic. And one of the things I tell people is that if you'll notice, none of these have anything to do with any specific topic. These are the bridges allowing you to talk about anything that you're being asked or needing to talk about. You could say, I've been asked that before. I've been asked that before. It might not be something you want to answer, but you've been asked it before and now you're going to answer it again. And of course, I'm glad you asked that. That's another really good one. They can all start with thank you, and then you can add that little bit. So those are examples of that. I do say beware of your facial expressions, especially when we're on.
That's the hardest part. It is the hardest part because your mouth may be saying something, and if you don't believe it, and if you don't feel it, it's really hard to. What advice do you give on that?
Practice. Actually, Zoom. I found Zoom and these kind of things were sometimes the best way to practice your facial expressions. I started realizing what my facial expressions were doing on some of the Zooms, and all of a sudden I was like, oh. So then I started paying attention a little bit more, or obviously just doing it in the mirror, talking in the mirror. But definitely on Zoom meetings, it's okay to keep your camera, your video, watching yourself a little bit. Most people won't know that you're actually watching yourself. And just as people are talking, just practice your facial expressions. Think about how that expression feels on your face. So if you're smiling, think about where you're feeling it. That's where we sometimes don't pay attention to what the muscles are doing and feeling what the face looks like. We're so used to it, we might not actually realize that we can actually feel what that looks like. So if we're doing this, you got to think about how that feels. If we're rolling our eyes, you got to think about how that feels, because it does feel different, but we're so used to it, we might not be even feeling that.
So you're saying actually take count of where everything is on your face and how it feels, like whatever motion you're feeling. Ooh, gosh, yeah, I feel it hurt. I'm a smiler. I smile all the time. And when I'm not smiling, when I'm frowning, I do feel it. This is the reaction you just got.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes that can be, I'm intent, but other times people can think, are you angry? No, I'm just really intent right here. But when you start feeling it, you can say, okay, let me relax that, because I can be intently listening without the look.
Yeah. And then I do not remember her name. I follow her on every social media account. She had done research on this about the human behavior and emotion, and she does say that even if you're now, you don't mean it, smile, but don't fake smile. Actually smile, move your muscles so that you're feeling, your cheekbones and everything. And when you do smile the real smile, you'll start your behavior will actually start changing, because you'll feel that emotion, not just in your face, but in your actual, your mind, and your body will relax. And I love that. I tried it. I'm like, ooh, it works.
It's funny. I think about that with my son. When kids are learning to smile for the camera, and all moms are like, "Oh my gosh, that's the worst smile. What were you doing?" Back to feeling it when they're really laughing, to ask them to feel what that feels like, and mimic that.
Yeah.
So even the smiling, you're right, because how do you get it so it's not fake? Well, you have to actually mimic what your real smile, what your real laughter
Mm,
feels like.
yeah.
And you can do it.
I love that. I love that. When I am faced with a situation where I need to smile and I don't feel like it, I tend to think of something that would make me smile, like a memory or a person that always make, my husband. I'll tell you, he just brings a smile to my face, and that's just normal.
That's always good.
Yeah, yeah,
That is good. Yes, and there are things in that real smile, right?
yeah,
Whatever it is that what they always say, and most people will have something. I'm like, maybe it's the warmth of the sun just
yeah,
puts a smile on your face.
yeah,
And I tell people you can feel that no matter what your surrounding is.
yeah.
It doesn't
True.
matter what you're surrounded by. You can feel that because that comes from inside,
Yeah,
not from outside.
yeah, yeah. I love that.
That's where the template comes in, right? So let's see. Another really good one is rephrasing questions.
Mm,
When somebody asks you a question, if you rephrase it to be sure that you have clarity on what they're asking and that you understand it,
mm,
that's a great bridge to be able to move from that lizard brain to your cognitive brain for that. So those are some things. So and in a general sense, being curious, and when you're having, if you're in a situation where you're uncomfortable, be more curious. Ask questions if you can. If you're not being the one interviewed per se, and responding with curiosity, and but those are some of the things that I usually give for people for the Toolbelt. And I encourage people to try their own. The whole goal, as I say, is to bridge you from the feeling you have
mm.
in that moment to something that's calm and intentional and conversational, a bit able to actually have a healthy conversation.
One of the things I tend to have a calm personality in general, and I've it's not something I would like to think that I maybe have some genes that help with that, but I do practice a lot on how I um react versus response and all of that. But one of the things I get from others who may not understand this behavior, or are used to the reaction, they're used to being triggered, and so they're waiting for an attack, and when they don't get the attack, um they're left like, what's next? And so what I get from those kind of individuals is, after the confusion wears off, is another attack. They attack um with accusations of, you don't care, um you're not involved, or and where I'm trying to calm the situation down, bring it down a level so that we can actually have a conversation versus being in that mode of nobody hears one another. And it's I understand, we're all we have situations that are in our life that brings us, unfortunately, to that level of not being able to understand each other. What would be what would be a good, I don't want to say tip, but what would be a good practice for somebody who is like that, who is waiting for an attack, who may not understand that not everybody reacts or responds in the same way? There are some people who will actually take time to think about what you have to say, and all there will be people who will respond with a thank you and completely surprise you, which is, I love. I gotta try this. What would you say to that?
So let me understand for sure, is you're looking for ways to be able to talk to somebody and show them that you understand them
Mm,
without having to go maybe match their emotions at that moment.
correct.
Is that
Yeah.
what I'm hearing?
Yes.
I just modeled what you do.
Mm, mm,
Rephrase what they've said
yeah.
and let them know you heard them.
And here's the second part to that question.
Okay.
You rephrase, you let them you let them hear that you understand. That's not enough. They're
It's not
still
that. Yep.
they're still, in that state of
Mhm. So what you might say, is there a question there or something that you wanted me to do? Or, I basically ask, how did you want me to, what would you like me to do to help?
okay.
What would you like me to do how would you like me to respond to this? Where would you like me to take this? I've done this with my own kids, and sometimes they're like, oh, I actually didn't want anything. I just wanted to just vent.
I just want to lash out at you.
And I'm like, great. Okay, we're done. But so ultimately if once they know that you've heard them and you've actually relayed, let me make sure I understand what you've said. You're saying this, and this is concerning to you. You don't like this, whatever they're saying. And so they feel heard, like, okay, she did hear me. Now let me ask you this. What would you like me to do with this information? Where would you like me to go with it? What would help? Then you put it back on them. And they actually will have to come up and say what they were expecting. And maybe they were expecting something to happen. But then, and again, we're touching on another discipline right now. There's a discipline called expectations and agreements. I know I need to bring them up. I need to probably list all the 12 disciplines here, but because so people don't, but expectations and agreements is another really popular one where people don't realize that they're needing that. But the idea is that we have a lot of expectations of people, but if we're not slowing down to be sure that we know what the agreement is, we could be just talking past people and never talking with them.
How do you make your expectations known?
It takes time. It's very intentional. So especially with a husband and wife, and again, I have another story with my husband. I'm trying to remember how this was. I had asked him, I think I had asked him to do something, and I realized that I'd asked something more than once. And that's probably a common thing with husbands and wives. My husband probably asked me a lot of things more than once too. So he asked more than once, and he wasn't doing it. And so then I asked him, I said, okay, so just dialing back, I've asked you to do this, and you've said, you've heard me. Are you agreeing that you're going to do it? He's like, well, no. I said, would you agree to do it? I mean, since I'm asking you to do it, are you open to agreeing to do that? Whatever. And I can't remember what it was. It doesn't matter necessarily what it was, because it could be anything. And he had to step back and say, actually really think about whether he was going to agree to do what I was asking him to do. And if he said no, then we figure it out. If he says yes, now we've got an agreement that I can hold him to. Because prior to that, I was just speaking.
Yeah.
Which, and in my head, I had an expectation. I spoke. You said yes, but you actually didn't agree to do it.
And a lot of people just repeat.
Or we say it again and again. Well, why aren't you listening to me? Well, I am, but I never agreed to do it.
Oh my gosh, we have to learn negotiation skills.
But and the expectations and agreement came from, actually there's a one of my mentor coaches is named Steve Chandler, and I actually have an audio that I will play for clients and things like that where he does it. He's sometimes he's actually, again, Michigander. I have a lot of Michigander coaches, by the way, but he is sometimes he's hard to listen to for a little bit because he's got a very slow, monotonous style of speaking. But when you start listening to his expectations and agreements, and of course it happens in the workforce. A boss will say something to their workers, and they'll say something, and the workers will say yep, but they don't actually agree to it. I actually know someone that got, I think the situations pretty sure they got fired because they actually never really agreed to doing it the way that they were being taught to do it, kept doing it their own way. And I'm like, that's not okay. So end up losing a job for that. because there was no good agreement. And, at the end of the day,
it wasn't clear enough. The communication wasn't clear enough, or the expectation wasn't set, or one of the above.
right. Which is why, and again, even when the expectation is set, if the other person does not actually agree, that's the big part. So we can have expectations all day long. And I'll hear people say that, oh, I've got this, I expect this, I expect this, I expect this. I mean, I have expectations, of my kids in the morning, but if they don't actually agree that they're going to be ready on time, do we really have an agreement? And everything can be an agreement. And it changes the dialogue. It changes the conversation. And it changes, again, back to being able to not be triggered or be emotional, having those kind of conversations, generally not in the moment. We got to move those off and say, okay, wait a minute, we need to.
That is really an interesting. What you said earlier about expectations is, yes, we set a lot of expectations, but I never thought about agreement partnering with expectations in that way, because you are 100% right. You could have expectations to the wazoo, but you would basically be talking to yourself,
right,
if you do not get the agreement. Wow, that's such a light on that.
So I'm gonna let's see, there we go. Okay. So I will actually, let me just grab this up. I thought I was going to ask you if you share, if I should have shared with you documents or like that. So I didn't know if I didn't know if this had documents.
None on this platform, but thanks for offering.
Okay.
I mean, definitely. What I want to know, though, for people who would want to learn more, is where they could learn more about the responsive tool belt, the 12 disciplines. If you can let our viewers know.
Yep. So I'll let you know that I'll list them all. So they are on my website, 12 Trees Coach. They're on .com. They're on the website. If you go to, I believe it's you, you'll see it says me, well, that's about me. Then you'll see you, and that's about how I would work with my clients. And then there's other resources and things like that on my website. But there is a list of the 12 disciplines, and I'll just list the titles now. So mental toughness. So these first 3 are part of the temple. So this is what we, if we do them in order, which we generally do, this is the first grouping that we would be doing. Mental toughness, which generally people kind of get a pretty good feel about that, but we take that a little deeper, and I give, there's things that I'll give you to do, some actually homework assignments that you can do to actually start practicing that. Then protect your mind, feed the good wolf. And I will touch on that a little bit, is if you've ever heard there's another story about the chief, Indian chief that said to his son, the son said, basically, how do I can't really right now, but basically says, I feel like I've got 2 people on my side. I want to do this and I want to do this, and they don't match. And basically saying, well, which one do I work with? It's like, well, feed the good wolf. If you're feeding your good wolf, you will see good things. Whichever one you feed, you'll have repeating. So there's actually another story with that. Abundance mentality. So those are the 3 in temple. The ones in transform are boundaries, not boxes. And that has to do a lot with what we think of ourselves. Get fouled. That is because that came from a story with my daughter, where if you're not in the game a little bit, if you're not putting a little pressure on yourself, a little stress on yourself, or getting a foul in basketball, maybe you're not in deep enough. Maybe you're not trying where you need to be. You don't have to get fouled out, but you got to get close enough to actually get fouled. So that's another one we work on. Building your responsive tool belt is actually part of transform. Then the trajectory, this is where we start working with other people. Expectations versus agreements. Focus, clarity, and perseverance. The conversations that matter, that takes us a little bit deeper into some of the conversations that we probably don't have. We like to have surface conversations. Then when we're transferring and we're actually developing other leaders, we first need to be able to identify in order to know who we're developing. So identifying and developing leaders. A relational life, that's about the fact that we have to have relationships. It's not just passing, people passing in the street.
Mhm.
And then this or that, us or them, we or I. That one takes it a little deeper into even some of the things that go on now. We use those phrases, but do we really know what we're saying when we're saying that? And it's all about bringing it together so that we can actually be leading somebody else to be better leaders for somebody else. Because we have to work with each other. At the end of the day, we have to have relationships, regardless of what we think.
Yeah, and it's our. I mean, we talk to people all the time at work, social gatherings, and family. We have everything is based on relationship, and our communication most of the time is broken. And it is, like you said, it's surface level. And I think it's so important that we go more than just surface level and actually, we say, "Hey, how are you?" Every morning you walk into the office, you say, "Hey, how are you?" What does the other person respond with? Good. You move on, right? And are they good? Maybe, I don't know. God knows. But that's like, that's just hitting service level. So I 100% agree with you with when it comes to relationships. I don't think we invest enough in that. I don't think we work hard enough on that, and it's so important.
No. Nope.
And I love that it's part of your list of the four the 12 disciplines.
12 broken out into 4.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So we have about 8 minutes left, and before we go, I want to first of all, 12 Trees Coach. Let me bring that up one more time. 12treescoach.com. Did I spell that correctly?
You did. Yes.
Woo. All right, I did something right today. Other than having you on and learning
Aw,
something.
yeah.
12treescoach.com is where to go to find the 12 disciplines and the responsive tool belt and learn more about what you do. But where else can people find you, and how can they work with you?
So what I'm doing right now is I will be, I am bringing these to people individually. If they want to work with me on an individual basis, they're more than welcome to work on me individually. Teams is a great place to, if a manager wants to bring me in to work on these, we could do these as a lunch and learn. We could do these as a little deeper, because I can do them at different, I can scale it. So they can go deeper, they can go a little bit on top. So it could be something that opens the door to be able to having another conversation, because again, I'm here to help with that relationships, whether it be, working with each other, being more productive, because at the end of the day, that's, we want from people is to be more productive, to be, one of the, and I'll add, without burnout, be more productive without burnout. And that's one of the things that is another part of what I do. And I've used this before. I've told people this before. It's like, I don't want to add to somebody's stress. I want to help them be able to, work with things. And sometimes it is learning to say no. Sometimes it's these other things. But the idea of, we need to be able to do things without burnout. And, we know the adage that we all have the same minutes in the day. How come some people are, can have these things in life and some people don't? Well, it does come to, we just have to be able to do it without, and it's juggling sometimes, but I want people to be just more productive without burnout. So I do with teams. I am actually in the process of working on getting these to be in a more downloadable format, so people could actually enroll in the curriculum on their own and do it on their own, or it'll actually be set up that there'll be some structure, so that between each of the modules, between Temple and Transform, there will be an opportunity where we can meet individually and see where they're at, see what they need to do. Because the coaching is a really big part of it. In order for that to take it from the surface to a deeper level, that it's part of somebody's life, is a really big, and part of their normal habits and behaviors is a big part. So that's coming. That is something I'm hoping to launch by the end of the year.
Awesome. And I back to what you were saying about coaching, we could go on and, download the material, look through it ourselves, but you really need the support, and even coaches need coaches. we don't need hand holding, but what we need is that the mirror, that person to help us kind of see what maybe others are seeing, but we don't. And this is the importance of having a coach. I'm so happy that you're putting this into a course format and modules so that others can actually take advantage of this, and hopefully your coaching as well. Finally, what would you say to somebody who maybe is having trouble with communication or being understood by others, or is constantly having issues? And this may be, listening to this podcast to what you had to say is a lot for them. Where do they start?
Where do they start? One of the things I actually, in my networking group, one of my networking meetings say, I said, sometimes it might be just starting with yourself. Go to the mirror and say something to yourself. I don't care what it is. Tell yourself something you're believing. Tell yourself something you're dealing with. And then ask yourself if it's true. Ask yourself if you really, really believe what you just said. Sometimes that's where we can start. Because, and even that can be hard, and I know, so it's sometimes for me, I will say, when I start working with somebody, I do spend a little bit of time getting to know that person, because I give them a different start. Sometimes I will ask them to read a book. Sometimes, and I've done this, I've asked someone to start hugging people. Just before they even work with me, because they actually have to be able to get, so what you're touching on is true. They have to be at a certain place. Yeah. And I'm not going to get them there necessarily through these disciplines. The disciplines might not be ready for them. So there are some things, but it is very individual. And so I will say that that's why for me, I do offer a 2-hour coaching, complimentary coaching, where we actually can do some of these things and I can get to know the person a little bit. They can get a feeling from me, and we can maybe get to one thing that they could actually start with to do things.
Excellent. I love it. Start small, start with one thing.
Yes.
I love that you're offering the 2-hour complimentary coaching. Thank you so much for joining us. This was it was a wealth of knowledge today. Dropped a lot of gems today. I learned so much, and I would love to. This is what I'll tell you. My biggest takeaway, which I would love to start using right away, is that thank you. And I've got your number. I will text you as soon as I use it. I'll tell you.
Oh, thank you. I love that. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I know we've been working on trying to get this on, and I love that it's now here.
Yeah. And I mean, it's got to be here because it is so helpful. This is why we do this. This kind of thing is because when we share our stories or our knowledge together with others, this is how we learn. I believe so much in the community type of learning, where we learn from each other and we learn together. So thank you so much for joining. And those of you who joined us live, left us a love, a like or a note, thank you so much. And if you are watching this on replay, tell us, what is your takeaway? What resonated with you the most? What are you going to use? I'm using thank you. What are you going to use? I would love to challenge you to learn from this and to share it out. Share it with somebody who you think needs it. And if you do not subscribe to this channel yet, please do. And we will see you on the next episode. Thanks for joining us.
They have more degrees than a thermometer.
When you're engaged,
Stands for their interests.
There's a lot of
Your
planning.
daughters will be here and you
I
will
believe
rest.
in mental health. Sure that we have mental
We travel together on the path to intentional leadership, one conversation at a time. We go down a new road of insight with an expert guest who knows what it takes to navigate the opportunities and challenges of leadership. Why? Because they've already been there. So grab your compass and whatever else you need, and let's set out, leading the way.